Okay, so moving on to example 2, they want you to sketch the graph of 2x squared plus 8x plus 7. We need to identify the vertex, the axis of symmetry, and the x-intercepts of the parabola. So we are actually going to do those things first before we sketch the graph. The sketching of the graph is actually the last thing that we do once we gather all this other information up. So the way that we're going to do this is we are going to take this equation that you see right here. And it's in standard form, or as your book calls it, general form, and we're going to move it into vertex form. The way that we do that is we actually have to complete the square. So what you see me doing is writing the equation first. I'm then going to group the x terms together. I'm going to factor out the 2, as you all should know how to do. I'm going to leave a space and then put my plus 7 right there. The new b that we have is 4. So we do b over 2, the quantity squared, which is 2 squared, which is 4. So I'm going to write, whoops, that got changed. Sorry about that. I'm going to take that 4. I'm going to write a plus 4 here, and then I'm going to write a minus 8 on the outside. Remember, the number that you write on the outside has to be the opposite of these two things multiplied together. And once I do that, I can then factor. So there is our new equation, f of x equals 2, parentheses, x plus 2, the quantity squared, minus 1. So remember, what you see right here is called standard form, or general form, their book calls it. What you see right here is called vertex form. Now, vertex form is extremely useful when we're graphing quadratics, because you can immediately look at the equation and get the vertex. And so you can see I wrote vertex form directly underneath the equation that I got. And I'm going to write the vertex, which is one of the things they asked us to identify. The vertex is always HK. So in this case, the H is -2. And the reason why it's a -2 is in the formula, it's supposed to be a minus. So we would have had to put a -2 in for H to get that minus to cancel. So it's -2, and then the K is what you see there, which is -1. So the vertex is -2, -1. That is where the parabola, in this case, the bottom of the parabola is going to be. Now, the reason why we know it's the bottom is that the lead coefficient here, this A, is +2. So our parabola is going to open up. The axis of symmetry, we find the axis of symmetry by simply writing x equals the number that you have in the vertex. So in this case, the vertex number was -2. So the axis of symmetry is going to be x equals -2. Now, the last thing that it wants us to find is the x-intercepts. And the way that you find the x-intercepts is you take this equation that you completed the square on, and you set f of x equal to 0 to find the x-intercepts. So I'm going to write x-intercepts, and we're going to have 0 equals 2, x plus 2 squared minus 1. So I'm going to move the 1 to the other side first. Then I'm going to divide both sides by 2. Then I'm going to take the square root, and then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move that 2 to the other side. So I'm going to have x equals -2 plus or minus, actually I'm going to back this up just a little bit because I'm going to need one more line. X equals -2 plus or minus the square root of 1 is 1. And that would be over the square root of 2. Now, we can't leave it like that. And the reason why we can't leave it like that is the bottom needs to be rationalized. And so we're going to multiply this by the square root of 2 over the square root of 2. And when we do that, our very last answer we end up with is x equals -2 plus or minus the square root of 2 over 2. And there are our x-intercepts. Now, you might say, well, I have no idea what number that is. That's okay. We can type that into our graphing calculator easily enough and to get our answer. So we're going to type in -2 and then plus, and then you do need parentheses around it, the square root of 2 divided by 2. And you can see I got -1.2. We'll say -1.3. So this is equal to -1.3. And it's also equal, now we're going to change that plus to a minus because there are two answers. So there again, -2 minus, and then parentheses, the square root of 2 divided by 2. We get -2.7. So these two values, this -1.3 and -2.7, are where the parabola is going to cross the x-axis. So now to sketch the graph, I'm going to draw a coordinate plane, just like this. I'm going to go ahead and put on, I don't know, let's do like 4 hash marks on each one, should be plenty. And then I'm going to put a dot. The first dot I'm going to put on is where the parabola's vertex is, which in this case is -2, -1, which is right there. Oop, you can't see this. I apologize. And then the next 2 dots we're going to put on is where that parabola crosses the x-axis. In this case, -1.3 is roughly there, and then -2.7 is going to be roughly there. And you can see this is starting to form the U shape we would expect, and it's just going to draw a little graph like this, and that's good enough. That's how you sketch the graph. And this does follow what we thought. And I'll go back up here for a second. You can see that this lead number A is positive. Therefore, our parabola opens up. So I have one more of these to take a look at. And those slides are just typed out what I just showed you. But I do feel that it's better that I write this out to explain what's going on. So this one, we have another parabola. You can see it's -3x squared minus 6x plus 4. One thing to note, this lead coefficient is negative. So this parabola is going to be opening down in this case. So I will take f of x equals -3x squared minus 6x plus 4. I'm going to group the x terms together. We're going to pull out that -3. Leave a space. Now I'm going to complete the square. So it's 2 over 2, which is 1 squared, which is 1. So I'm going to write +1 there. And then I'm going to write +3 on the outside. Again, this number on the outside is the opposite of the number that you put here and the number that you have out there. So -3 times 1 is -3. So we put a +3 on the outside. Now that we have completed the square, we're going to go ahead and factor. So we have f of x equals -3, and then it's going to be x plus 1, the quantity squared, plus 7. So right there is vertex form. I'm going to write vertex form underneath of this, a x minus h squared plus k. So you can see how everything lines up. We do need to list the vertex, the axis of symmetry, and the x-intercepts. So we'll start with the vertex. The vertex is going to be hk, which is going to be -1 and then 7. Yes, it's supposed to be negative. You got to think about what number we put in here. If I put a -1 in for h, a negative of a -1 would give us a +1, which is what we have in the equation. So keep that in mind. It's always going to be opposite of whatever number's here. So the vertex is -1, 7. The axis of symmetry is simply x equals -1. Okay. The last thing we need to do is to determine where the x-intercepts are. And the way that we do that is we take this equation that we have now in vertex form and we set it equal to 0. And then we're going to solve it by moving the 7 to the other side first. Then dividing by -3. Taking the square root and then subtracting 1. So I'm going to write x equals -1. We do need to rationalize the bottom of this fraction. We need to multiply by the square root of 3 over the square root of 3 so we have no more radical on the bottom. So you get -1, and then it's going to be plus or minus, and then on the top it's going to be the square root of 21, and then just over a 3. Now, if I were to type that into my calculator, which I'm going to do right now, we're gonna take this and we're gonna write -1, and then we're gonna do plus, and then we need to do the square root of 21. Get out from underneath there, divided by 3. And when I do that, I get 0.527. So we'll just call it 0.5. That's fine. Now I'm going to go ahead and take and change that plus to a minus because we have that plus or minus. So there's the minus, and we get -2.5. So there's our two numbers. Those are our x-intercepts. So now it's just a matter of graphing. So I'm going to draw my coordinate plane. Let me move this out of the way so you can see that. Now remember, we said that this lead coefficient right here was negative, so it's going to be a parabola that's upside down. So that's what we should expect to see. The vertex is at -1, 7. So that puts me clean up here for the vertex. And then we need to graph the x-intercepts. Now the x-intercepts we figured out were at about 0.5, which is right there, and then -2.5, which is right there. And so now the last thing to do would be to connect these points down like this. And you can see that this is indeed a parabola that opens upside down. So there you go, guys. I know this was a little bit of a longer one. That's why it's 2 parts, but there was a lot of information in this one that I needed to talk about. So as always, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. Have a great day.